Hey everybody, Koricon here, and this is my review of K.G.F. Chapter 1. K.G.F. stands for Kohler Goldfields, which was a real place. It's a real gold mining area and a dark part of Indian history where people were enslaved to dig gold. And that is a major part of this film as well. K.G.F. was written and directed by Prasad Neil. I hope I pronounced that right. Please let me know, correct me. And is starring the rocking star Yash. Has a very large following. I've noticed that on Twitter. This movie is a Kannada language film, and I don't get very many Kannada language films in theaters in the United States. We get one every once in a while, and it's usually at the theater where I have to drive like an hour to an hour and a half to go and see it. But this one was released a lot wider than I was expecting, and it came out at the theater in Westminster, which for me is only 30 minutes away. And so I was surprised, blown away, and it's awesome that we could get a Kannada language film that close to me. Now, this is technically the first Kannada language film that I've seen in theaters, and so that was awesome. Now, the theater did have a good amount of people in there on a Thursday night, which I think most people are going to end up seeing it tomorrow on Friday night. But for those of you that have seen some of my other reviews, I end up seeing movies at weird times, like at 1 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and there's nobody in the theater. And so I got to see it. It was half packed for an evening showing on a Thursday. And we had people in there whistling and cheering and yelling at the camera, at the screen. And so I got a little bit of a taste of what you all want me to experience in India. And that was nice. I enjoyed that. I was sitting next to an Indian family and everybody was just enthralled. I have some positives and some negatives that I'd like to go over with you. Now, this is a chapter 1, so there's going to be a chapter 2, and hopefully it gets just as wide a release so I can watch that in the theaters as well next year. But chapter 1 really focuses on Yash's character, where he came from. It's kind of his origin story and why he is the way he is. You know, it's growing his character and putting you in this situation. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. The movie takes place in 3 different times. Today, 2018, 1981, which is the core story, and then Yash when he was a kid in, I think it was like 1961 or he was born in 1951, I think is what they said. And so it starts out with a journalist interviewing a writer of this book that was kind of banned. It was banned everywhere, and the producer got a rare copy of the book, and the reporter wanted to interview the writer. And so he's telling this story to the interviewer on camera. And the majority of our story is during the 1981 part with Yash, and it intercuts between his childhood and 1981. A lot of times I'm iffy on that. If it's not done right, it doesn't work. But they did it right. They did it right with those intercuttings, because the stuff that happens when he's a kid and how he's dealing with his mother and the situation that they're in, they peel these layers off, that every time you get a little bit of a story from his past of what was going on with his mom is relevant to what is going on to him in 1981. And so they'll peel this layer off and then show you, and then peel this layer off and then show you again. And so as the movie progresses, when you get to the end, there's a part of the layer that he learns as a child that becomes super relevant for the ending of the film, and I don't want to give that away. You got to go watch it. But I liked how they peeled those. The sets were incredible. I loved the sets that he had for the gold fields. You had really large mining sets. You also had large underground mining sets. And then you had some nice city sets that were properly set for 1981. The clothing looked a lot like 1981, and the cars and stuff like that. And I love period pieces. So I like analyzing those things, but I don't think there was enough in the background to really scream 1981, but the clothes really sold it. So I still felt like it was that time period. But if they didn't do, I think they could have done a little bit more in making it feel like that time period. However, once you get to the gold fields, everybody's in rags, and so the time period doesn't really matter. There was some great cinematography in the film, which I'm not surprised because a lot of Indian films for all of the industries have some amazing cinematographers, and Kannada is no different. So the cinematography looked great. I liked the lighting. There was a lot of natural light, but they did have, regular lighting as well. But it did work. It looked great. And then the directing, for the most part, was really good, especially during the dramatic moments. Some of the fight stuff was good, but I had some problems with it, and I'll get into that in a minute. And the acting was over the top, but on point. It was very good. Now, this is an entertainer. This is an entertainer film. You're going to have your action. You're going to have a little bit of humor, not too much because of the tone of the film, but you're going to have your action, your song and dance, all of that stuff. So if you don't like entertainers, you may not like the movie, but I would say kind of give it a shot anyway, because I think it's worth it. Now, the action scenes were pretty good, but I feel conflicted because on one side, the thing that I talk about all the time, the SCQ, shaky cam, close-ups, and quick cuts. If you have too many of these, it will ruin an action sequence. They had some shaky cam. There were a lot of quick cuts. That was one of the big flaws to the action scenes, where they cut way too fast and you had to try and reacclimate with every cut. However, the slow-mo that a lot of people complain about, but I don't really seem to have a problem with, the slow-mo parts actually helped the quick cut parts, because when you get into that cinematic slow-mo section that they do, it gives you enough time to reacclimate enough for when they do the quick cuts again, you're following it along, and before you can get confused again, it goes into another slow-mo. So even though I would prefer longer cuts and a better edit on the action sequences, the slow-mo actually did help with the reacclimation of the quick cuts. But again, I would have preferred longer cuts. But the action was still cool, and you were rooting for your guy, and when he went badass, you were right there with him. Now, there was one action sequence where the quick cuts, they weren't actually as quick as some of the others, but it worked in its favor. And I don't want to give anything away, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And it's in the mine with the fire and the horror elements. That was my favorite part of the film. I thought that was filmed beautifully. I thought it worked very well. I loved that action sequence. I loved the tone. Everything about that sequence was great. Now, when it comes to the music, the background score was really good. Now, it wasn't overpowering the film in any way. It supplemented the tone, but it wasn't also like super memorable in that I can repeat the tone or repeat the notes of what the background music was. But I remember in watching the film that whatever emotion I was feeling, the background music supported it, and it did a good job with that. The songs, the main songs that are in the movie, they sound great, and I like them individually. When I listen to them on YouTube and stuff like that, I like those songs. But the way that they intercut things, they're transitioning in this film, it kind of hurt the song and dance sequences. And it also hurt some other parts of the film. And this is going to be my biggest negative, I think, is there were too many really stark tone changes that just, you had this sequence that would happen, and then there would just be a hard cut to the next sequence, and then a hard cut to the next sequence, and like a hard cut to the music, and then a hard cut to this next sequence. So it seemed like they filmed these sections of the film, but they didn't know how to transition between those sections. So the the section that they're filming, this entire film sequence that takes place on this set, this action scene, whatever, that was filmed as a complete scene. And in the song and dance sequence was filmed as a complete scene. The drama that happens before that was filmed as a complete scene, but then they couldn't transition between those chunks very well. And so you were getting these really stark tone changes that were kind of throwing me off. So I would have liked if they did their transitions between tonal changes much better, but I was able to kind of get used to it. And by the second half of the film, it didn't matter as much because the tone doesn't change. The first half of the film has a lot of tone changes between like humor and some drama, and then the song and dance, and then a little serious, and then back. But then once you get to the Goldfields, the tone kind of stays consistent through the second half of the movie. And so that part was done well, and there weren't any really stark tone changes after that. I thought Yash did a great job. He was very charismatic. He was funny when he needed to be funny. He was serious when he needed to be serious. And he had this aura, you know, this aura of awesomeness. And I really liked him. I thought he did a great job. But another standout for me was one of the villains. And the actor, I think his name is Ayappa P. Sharma. I could be wrong with that. But he had long hair and his beard, very intimidating. His voice, the way that he talked, I loved the sound of his voice. This is one of the reasons why I like watching films in the language that it's filmed in. So this is a Kannada film. They're releasing it in the US in Telugu as well. And if you want to see it, I'm not saying you can't see it in Telugu. If you want to see it, fine. That's great. But reviewing the film, I want to see it in the language it's filmed because of this kind of a reason. Sharma's acting, although over the top a bit, matched Yash in being the yin and yang of good and evil. And his voice was one of those things. He had a deep, kind of guttural voice, and it matched his stature. And so all of that came through. Even though I didn't understand the language, with the subtitles, I knew what he was saying, but his performance came through. And I think it would come through better in Kannada in the way that he said it than it would if it was dubbed. So overall, good job, guys. I liked the movie. Thank you to Weekend Cinema for talking with me on Twitter and making sure that I could get some dates. Thanks a lot to a subscriber, Kushal, who actually bought me the ticket to go see the movie. You are awesome. And just all the support that's been coming in from the trailer reaction to me seeing the movie. You all have been amazing, and I want to thank you for that. I'm going to give K.G.F. Chapter 1 a B+. I liked the acting. I liked the action. I liked some of the drama. I had problems with those transitions between tonal changes and how some of that stuff was dealt with, and I would have preferred the action sequences have been filmed differently. But other than that, I mean, it's great. Now, one of the things I think some people are going to have a problem with, which they have that same problem with all entertainer-type films, is they don't like the over-the-top action, you know, where he's doing unrealistic movements. I've never had a problem with that as long as there's a reason. Now, when I say when there's a reason, I don't mean a scientific reason. I mean just give me a reason in the story. Like Superman can do what he does because he's an alien. In the Matrix, they do what they're doing because they're in the Matrix. With this, it's told smartly in that he doesn't get special powers from, a god or anything, but it's being told from a storyteller. So this is actually a third-person film. The writer is telling the interviewer this story. So because it's a third-person point of view storyline, you can make it as fantastical as you want because it's not actually happening. It's happening from the storyteller's point of view. That being said, they have a second reason that he has these powers, and that would be the power of the mother. And I love how that worked out. It's a gamble, but I think they pulled it off right in that he, you know, when they show the backflashes, the stuff with him and his mom, she's, you know, protecting him. She gives everything to make sure that he is safe and that he is okay and that he learns and that he grows. And they touch on it a couple of times in the film that mothers are important and that the strongest people are mothers because of what they have to sacrifice for their children. And he draws some of that power and that experience in what he does. So the way that he is was molded and created by her. I liked that. It's unconventional. You know, a lot of movies are just going to say, you know, Shiva gave him powers, or that, you know, he's an alien, or that they're in the Matrix. So I thought it was a brave decision to do that, but a really good one. And I like the way it turns out. But what do you guys think? Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Links to all of my stuff is in the description below, so check that out. And I will see you guys on the next video.